Welcome to Peninsula Seniors Lecture Series. Sit back, get comfortable, and let's go see what they have for us today.
I'm Mary Ann Ramoyne. I am the Executive Director of the Peninsula Seniors. And this morning we are going to hear from Bob Henry, who is from the Port of Los Angeles, and he will speak on the red car system. Bob?
Good morning, I'm Bob Henry with the Port of Los Angeles. I was the project manager for the construction of the Waterfront red car line, which is a 1.5 mile streetcar line that runs between the Cruise Center along the waterfront down to 22nd Street. And what I'll do this morning is kind of go back a little bit in history, some of the PE history, but also show you some slides that I put together and also a video of the opening and the construction. And a couple of weeks ago, my manager of streetcar operations called me. He was looking for some correspondence from 2002 from the FRA. The red car line down there, we are very well regulated. We're regulated by the Federal Railroad Administration, and we're also regulated by the California Public Utilities Commission. And he was asking me for some correspondence from 2002 from the FRA. And I happened to find this letter from the Peninsula Seniors dated March 21, 2002 from Russell Harrington, thanking me for making a presentation to your group and inviting me back again. So here I am 10 years later, back to make another presentation on the red cars. What happened in the 1990s is you were here? And so if I repeat myself in 2002, forgive me. So, you know. But anyway, what happened in the 1990s is that the Mayor Reardon had a blue ribbon task force to develop the waterfront along between Harbor Boulevard and the water. And part of that was a suggestion to put in a streetcar line or a trolley line running between the cruise terminal and 22nd Street, because they felt that the task force felt there was a string of pearls along there. So essentially I built the string. And so what we did is, what happened is we decided that we were going to make a streetcar line, and somehow through a series of awful coincidences I wound up being the project manager. And what happened is back in 1962, I came to California from New York. My parents drove out here in their covered wagon, and we came out here, and the red car stopped running in 1961. So as soon as I got here, I kept hearing about, oh, they should have kept the red cars, they should have done this, and I discovered there's a lot of nostalgic affection for the red cars. And I handed out a map, and this map is the red car system, the Pacific Electric system in the mid-1920s. And as you can see, it ran all over Los Angeles, including out to Redlands, all the way out to Owens Mouth, which is now Canoga Park, San Pedro, Newport Beach. It ran everywhere in Los Angeles. So my thing was, let's not just put in a streetcar line, let's build a red car line. And of course, I had no idea what I was asking for when I said that, because it became quite an adventure. So as you can see from this map, we're down here in San Pedro, down here in the lower part. And you'll see in the video, you'll see in a slide a bascule bridge that ran right across the West Basin right here in the lower part, across from Wilmington to San Pedro. So you'll see that in the slides coming up in a minute. But what happened is I started doing some research. I was asked to start, well, can we actually do this thing? And my executive director at the time, he really got excited about it, and I was not really ready to start the project. This was in January of 1999. I was not really ready to start yet. In fact, we were told that, well, if you go at the Orange Empire Railway Museum, which is in Paris, California, which if you guys can get a caravan together to go out there, I recommend it highly. If you go to oerm.org in Paris, California, that's their website. They have the largest collection of red cars in the country. It's wide open spaces out there. It's a long drive to get there, but they do have special events on their website. For example, if you have grandkids, take them out to a day out with Thomas the Tank Engine. They do things like that. They also have special, it's in Paris, outside Riverside, by Riverside. Long drive. But if you check the website, some days it's really worth it to make the drive out there. They have all kinds of red cars out there. In fact, we were told, well, go out there, Bob, and maybe you can buy one from them. Well, of course, they were not going to sell any red cars to me at all. But as it turned out, our executive director got kind of excited in March of 1999 and said, oh, yeah, we're going to build it. He went out to the community and said, we're going to build this red car project. I said, well, you know, Larry, I'm not even ready to go yet. So once he made that commitment, we were really ready. We were not really ready to go, but I had to start doing something. So basically, what we decided to do was hire a company in Seattle to build the cars, and I'll get into that story later as we show the video. But I just started to do some more research on the history of red cars in San Pedro, because I wasn't even sure what kind of cars we were going to build now that we were building cars, before I was ready to build them. So I did some research, and what I do is like to show you a few slides here. This is a Bernie car. This is actually a small local line that ran in San Pedro, and you see it on La Rambla on the car. That was the La Rambla line that ran up from the Waterfront, which that's Front Street right there, ran up 6th Street and 7th Street to La Rambla, which was the home of John T. Gaffey. If you've been to the San Pedro Peninsula Hospital, that's La Rambla, that's where that line used to run. This is a kind of a fun slide that somebody sent me about 2 years ago, because there was also a Point Fermin line that ran in San Pedro. And this was sent to me about 2 years ago, and it was kind of neat. But it started here on Pacific Avenue, ran down here, looped around over this way, and all the way over here to Point Fermin Park. And what happened is about 2 weeks after somebody sent this to me, if you've ever been to the Omelet and Waffle Shop down in San Pedro, the two ladies who own that have a house here on 38th Street, which is right here. They were remodeling. The landscaper got very aggravated because when he was digging in the yard, he came across railroad ties. And the railroad ties he came across was a PE line that ran right between the houses, all around this loop, all the way over here. They live on 38th Street if you're ever in San Pedro and you want to drive down there. What they did is they put fake railroad ties to commemorate, well, that's where the red car line used to run on the Point Fermin line. Over here was Sunken City. In 1926, all this collapsed right in here. It's located in the south part of San Pedro, and it's at the end of Pacific Avenue, right in this area here. This is actually a picture taken at Point Fermin Park. And this picture would never be duplicated again because everything east of the red car fell in Sunken City. But this is where the line ended. And if you're ever riding your Harley Davidsons down on the weekend to Walker's Cafe, that building is Walker's Cafe. It's right across the street from Point Fermin Park. If you look at the street down there, you'll find that there's concrete on both sides and there's asphalt running down the middle. And if you look at the asphalt closely, there are cracks, parallel cracks running down that asphalt, and I'll bet you the rails are still under the asphalt there. But that, of course, you can't do that anymore because it's all collapsed behind here. This is a 500 series car, and this is one of the slides that got me interested in what kind of cars we were going to build. And I found that the 500 series is probably the most popular or the most used cars during the system. And these are two gentlemen here, the conductor and the motorman. You notice up here in the corner on the destination board, it's Catalina. And in 1909, they were already running cars down to Wilmington to take the Catalina boats over to Catalina. And one thing I liked about these cars is it's a wood siding, as you can see, and also the curved windows right in here. These cars were called Huntington Standard cars, and Henry Huntington was actually the one who founded the PE system back in the late 1890s and held on until 1911 until they merged with the Southern Pacific Railroad, and he decided he was going to take all his money. And if you've ever been to San Marino, I urge you to go to the Huntington Library and Gardens. That is well worth a trip. The Huntington Library and Gardens in San Marino, it's unbelievable. That's his home. He has art gallery there. He has the Gutenberg Bible in there. Go during the springtime when the rose garden is up in bloom. It's a beautiful place. But everywhere you're here, Huntington around here, Huntington Park, Huntington Beach, the Huntington Library, that's Henry Huntington. He was the founder of it. So he designed these cars, and these windows are curved glass. And in my naivete, I said, oh, let's build these cars. And of course, glass bending is an art that has somewhat disappeared, but I was actually able to find the same company, California Glass Bending, for our cars to make the same windows that he had made back then. The caps that the gentlemen are wearing, we were able to find the same company that makes the caps that the conductors are wearing, this Lancaster Cap Company. They're still in business. This is another 500 car, again, very popular throughout the line. What's actually happening here is this is the opening of the subway tunnel. There actually was a subway in Los Angeles back in 1925, and it ran from downtown LA, where the PE building is, on 6th and Main, out toward Glendale. And this is the Glendale-Burbank line. What is actually happening here is they're coming through the tunnel. This is one of the first cars through the tunnel. And all the ladies on the car are the secretaries who worked at the Pacific Electric Company in downtown LA, and they're out for a joyride as going through the tunnel. Again, another 500 car, and every time I saw one of these pictures, I said, this is what we're going to build. So, this is the Pacific Electric Station in downtown San Pedro. Our station on 6th Street is located about 50 feet east of it. This station was built in 1909, was torn down in about 1958 when the cars stopped running in San Pedro. Actually, what happens with the PE is not only are they doing passengers, they're also delivering freight and newspapers and mail. And that's a box motor delivering the mail from downtown, from the post office downtown. One of the people in San Pedro, Father Art Bartlett, a longtime San Pedran, who just passed away a couple of years ago, I loaned some pictures for him to do a presentation to a group, and one of my photos showed the red car with a pile of newspapers next to the car. And he said what he used to do when he was a kid, he'd come down from his house to wait for the newspapers to arrive from the PE car, pick them up, and ride his bike back home, delivering the newspapers all the way back home. So that's how he got the newspaper every day. This is another shot of the PE line. You can see of the station. You can see the City Hall in the background. That's still standing. That was built in 1927. That's the San Pedro City Hall. The red car is one of the later ones. This is a 1954 picture. San Pedro, they stopped running the cars in San Pedro in 1958. So this is one of the later pictures. We were able to, you see these tiles here. There's tiles right up here. These are PE insignia. And it's an interlinked P and E, all done in tile. They're actually concrete triangles, very heavy. We bought 2 of those. They're the last 2 existing, and they're sitting up in, Geraldine Natz is our executive director, who's also a history buff, and they're sitting in her office right now, and she's using them as end tables. But we bought those. We're trying to track down, we know there's one of these dials up here, the tile where it says PE in a large round dial. We know where one exists. We're still trying to buy that. This is the Beacons building in Wilmington. If you look on your map, you see the main line coming down from downtown LA, and then it branches off. One line goes toward Long Beach and one line goes toward San Pedro. And this is the line running to San Pedro through Wilmington. The port owns that building, and what we're going to do is the bottom floor, or the first 2 floors, will become a red car museum in the next few years. Geraldine Natz, again, like I said, is a history nut, and she wants to build a red car museum. We're going to cooperate with the Orange Empire Railway Museum to bring artifacts over and put the museum on the first 2 floors. So we're going to put our archives. We're right now doing a lot of photographic research into our archives in the port, because until recently our history of the port has been kind of hit and miss, so now we're trying to make archives. So they'll be up on the 3rd floor. This building is kind of interesting because I was doing some history research for our book we wrote a few years ago, and I discovered that if you ever shopped in Smart and Final actually started in the Port of LA, because George Smart came to our traffic manager at the time in 1915, and he wanted to put a warehouse in where he could do a warehouse grocery business, and we had warehouse space available because after World War I started, the port was in a down period because no cargo was coming through, so we offered him warehouse space on the waterfront. This was the second home of Smart and Final, and which is now the Beacons building, as we call it. But that's where Smart and Final first started out. This is where the crazy project manager really got nutty. What happened here is you see that red car, that's red car 1058. And when I started the project and word got out what we were doing, somebody told me, hey, there's a red car up in Vernon. Why don't you go up and see what it looks like? So I went up to look at it, and of course it's huge. And it's actually an original red car, 963. What happened is a gentleman named Richard Fellows, who had a boatyard in the port, got a number of old red cars and was converting them to run on rubber tires and with an engine in it. And so what he did is he finished this one, and unfortunately he drowned ironically in Huntington Beach body surfing one day, so he couldn't finish the other cars. So I went up to Vernon, and his widow had the car. She wanted to sell the car because she had to get the warehouse sold, and so, but she couldn't sell the warehouse without with the car in it. So I said, well, how much do you want for it? She said, well, $80,000. So I went back and I said, well, gee, I can't really buy it because I don't have the undercarriage or anything to convert it to rail. So my consultants on the project, we found some parts that were made in Japan, which were sent to Kennebunkport, Maine for the Seashore Museum, and they were fit what we needed. So I bought them from the Seashore Museum and had them shipped out here to our warehouse we had set up. And I went to Lois Fellows, that was her name, and I said, okay, Lois, I can give you the $80,000. So she said, okay, fine. So my executive director says, well, you can't do that, because how are you going to get it from Vernon down to San Pedro? Well, we're going to drive it. Well, I said, well, go back and negotiate whether we want $80,000 and a full tank of gas. So we went back, and I gave her $80,000. She gave me a full tank of gas. So we drove that down Figueroa Street from Vernon down to berth 57 in the port, where we had a temporary warehouse set up. And that was in October of 1999. So the foolish project manager, who sometimes enthusiasm gets ahead of him, decided, well, let's put it in the San Pedro Christmas Parade. So, of course, it's 85,000 pounds. I'm sure it's been the largest entry ever in the San Pedro Christmas Parade. But the one thing I didn't think about is, well, what happens if it breaks down? But fortunately, it didn't. And it was quite an adventure to drive it down and make a right turn on 6th from Pacific Avenue here is what happened here. And now we're going down 6th Street. But I kind of did this as to commemorate Richard Fellows, whose idea was to put it in parades. And this was the last parade it was in 1999. And also, I wanted to advertise the fact that, yes, we are working on the Red Car project. So here I had the biggest entry in the parade. About 6 months before we finished the cars, I had some very good researchers anyway, and we had the Orange Empire Railway Museum as our source. And what we did is, actually what happened is a gentleman named Jack Whitmire, who worked for the Southern Pacific Railroad many years ago, sent me this photo. And it's the original red car 501 at the Riverside Shops in about 1910. And of course, we found that what we expected to see anyway, we see the outline, the lettering, the numbering is all exactly what we had. So these are you see the workers standing there proudly in front of the cars. So in 2006, we decided to do the same thing. And this is our car, the one we built. And these are some of the manager of street operations here, and this is me here. And I'm still trying to lose that stomach, but that's in 2006. And this again is another shot. 501, the original car in the Riverside Shops. That's me there, getting bad knees. So we were able to, as you see, the cars are almost identical. And that's what we tried to do. We tried to build, as I call them, the replica cars. If you get on the cars today, and I urge you to come down to ride on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, what you see in those cars is what you would have seen in the 1920s on the original 500 car, because we duplicated everything. I drove the carpenters out to the Orange Empire Railway Museum. We did their field trip, so they could look at all the pieces and parts from the original cars, and was able to duplicate a lot of all of the stuff that's in the old cars, which you'll see in the video. But that got them enthused about how we're going to do the project. This is the Bascule Bridge. I know it's hard to see on your little map there, but where the line comes into San Pedro, this Bascule Bridge ran across the West Basin. It's down here in the lower corner right in here. And that Bascule Bridge was there until 1955, until a ship ran into it. And they took the bridge out. Then the red cars used to have to go around the West Basin to get into San Pedro. You can see Palos Verdes. There's some nice, probably good property values there right now. You can get a lot of land if you wanted to. But so that's the Bascule Bridge. What I'd like to do now is go to the video that we've put together. This video was actually done as we were building the cars and at the grand opening. And we've put a little stuff in the beginning, which will come quick. You'll see, first of all, the Catalina Terminal. You'll see cars coming to the Catalina Terminal, which was in Wilmington, where you get on the Great White Steamship and take that over to Catalina. That's that shot here. And then you'll see the red car coming over the Bascule Bridge. This is getting off of the Catalina line. That's the Bascule Bridge right there, coming over the West Basin. And there's a trestle coming into San Pedro. You'll see it swing around here. That is now coming into downtown San Pedro. If you've been down to the Iowa is probably just a bit to the left of that there, coming into the station. This is probably the late 1940s, or maybe early 50s, because looking at the automobiles. This is 1058 after I converted it to rail. After I and a whole bunch of other people converted it to rail. This is the car repainted, and that's all the Japanese running gear that I bought is underneath the car now, and that's how I was able to buy it. This is coming into the 22nd Street station. Those warehouses in the background you see there are now crafted at the Port of Los Angeles. If you're interested in crafts, come down on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. The Crafted at Port of LA is open, and they have about 100 people in there making crafts. And if you want to do any Christmas shopping, that's the place to do it. This is the passing siding where 500, which we built two replicas, 500 and 501. And so the 500 is the other replica. At the end of the line, of course, we have to raise the trolley poles. We cheated a bit on the cars because the 500s had one single pole that swung around, but since we go back and forth so often, we put two poles on the car to make it easier. That's, of course, the map you have, which we have at the stations. And there's a signboard at every station that has the history of the Pacific Electric and a little history of our project. Again, there's a picture I showed you earlier, the 500, 501. This is car 1001. This is out at the Orange Empire Railroad Museum. This is parked on the siding, and by 1946 we duplicated that shot at 1058 in the same place. This is San Pedro 1950. Again, the PE station is there. You can see the crowds actually at that time. You can't have a grand opening without speeches, so here's Councilwoman Hahn making a speech. That's John Olguin, the citizen of the century. This is the crowd on opening day, July 19, 2003. And we had 1058 coming into the station. And this is actually the construction going back to April 2002. We started doing, actually a company came in and started doing some filming. This was the warehouse I set up at berth 155A in Wilmington. What happened is these cars were started in Seattle and the company could not finish them, so we packed up everything, drove it all down to Wilmington and put it into a warehouse at 155A, and this is all the construction work going on. These were actually Harbor Department carpenters who I drafted for this project, and bought them all new equipment, saws and drills and everything, and they went at it. They really got into the project because, again, these are the guys I took out to the Orange Empire Railway Museum, and they were building something that they could show. What they do is, if you work on the port, as these guys did, you couldn't ever show your family what you did, but in this project they could. So they took a lot of pride in their work, and again, you can see all the woodworking. We had one person on the job whose only job was to go buy the wood. And so we had ash, mahogany, coming from Long Beach lumber yard. And everything is handmade, custom made. We had this is Tim Buxton, one of our carpenters. You see all the windows, all the clerestory windows we're manufacturing. These are the seat brackets. We had to make each one of those. And this is they're putting on the roof. Again, it was all experimental for us because we didn't know exactly, all the stuff that they used before was not going to be good enough. And so we were learning as we went along as what would be a good roof material. So these guys are installing the roof here. We started this in about 2001, and we finished the first car in April of 2003. These guys had to hand make each of the hinges because we never could find a hinge that would work the windows right there. And of course, one of the requirements of working there was facial hair, apparently. But this is, here we're varnishing the woodwork. They put 9 coats of varnish on all the woodwork. You can see all the pieces. They were just like we're an assembly line. We're turning all these pieces out. And I got in trouble because what I was doing on the first Saturday of every month, we had an open house. You'll see the flyer or the banner come up here in a few minutes. So what I would do on the open houses on a Saturday, that allowed the employees to bring their families down. But I would have the open house because the project was getting delayed and I wanted to show people were making progress. So what I would do is I would show videos of the old red cars running and serve popcorn. And the workers didn't like that because you saw all this varnishing going on and they were complaining about the popcorn dust, so I had to stop serving popcorn. And these guys are hoping to build more than 2 as we got going. And again, these were very skilled carpenters. I was very lucky to have them working for the Harbor Department at the time they were there. And some have moved on to other jobs, and we'd never be able to do this again. This was a once-in-a-lifetime thing for us to do. But you can see all the craftsmanship that went into those cars. So when you go down there, ride them on Saturday and Sunday, or Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, look at the woodwork, and you can see this is what these guys were doing to make those cars. This is Ron Hayes. His only job was to make the seats. And you'll see in the cars, they're wooden seats. They're walkover seats. You pull the handle, and they go back and forth just like the old ones did. In fact, we went through a number of iterations on the brackets trying to figure out how to make it work. We had to go back and, well, let's make like the old ones did. So the old brackets are what we put in. Again, this is the warehouse. This is all the electrical equipment we bought and to run the cars. Again, this came from all over the country. I was buying parts all over the place. We had those manufactured to match the originals. More electrical stuff. These are the trolley pole springs, which we had handmade also. Our issue was that the wire is higher than normal because there's grade crossings now. It's got to be 26 feet, so we had to get springs that would hold it up there but not be too tight, so we had to hand manufacture those. This is the open house that I had. People lining up to come in to see the cars, the work in progress. And on that car, every one of those wood siding pieces was an individual piece. And we have those air brake tanks right there. One of the challenges was when we got the cars from Seattle, you see the cars on a steel frame. I had them built on a steel frame with a wood covering, and we found that everything didn't line up properly. So the guys had to do a lot of fitting and refitting in order to get things to fit in because things were not perfectly lined up. So that's their handiwork. You see all that woodwork. These are some more trucks I bought from another museum. These are the painters getting ready to paint. Well, we had an issue of trying to find the exact paint color, which we did. You'll notice if you in that first shot where the 1058 is going past 501, they are actually different colors of red, and one is Pacific Electric red, and the other one's Electric Lines red, and we matched the colors to the time period. And this is part of our challenge here, where we're trying to get the color here. They're mixing small batches, trying to get the right color. Again, you know, the idiot project manager wanted to have everything exact. It was kind of a pain in the neck, actually. This is when I couldn't have my popcorn. That's the issue we had, was we were doing everything in one place. So we couldn't have a paint shop at one end and an assembly line at the other. We had to have everything done at the same place. So you'll notice there's nobody else in these shots when the painters are working, because it had to be a pristine environment. Again, this car is darker than the other one because this was the earlier color. This is 1058. This we had it in a tent, which is now where we keep the car. Built in 1907 as 963, and Mr. Fellows lathed it and turned it into 1058. The 10 series was ended at 1057, so we numbered it 1058. That's the interior. Those are the seats we put in as we were starting to put them in 1058. I was able to find some old car cards that we put up in the. That guy looks a lot younger there, and. This is where we pulled them out. That's where our workshop was. We were getting ready to pull the cars out. What we did with 1058 prior to this video being made is 1058 was also in 155A. It was so big that what we did is we pulled it out. And not me, I had nothing to do with it. I just sat there getting nervous. But what we did is 4 forklifts came in where the trucks were and lifted the things simultaneously off the trucks. They moved the trucks out, put the trucks on the rail, lined them up. The 4 forklifts drove over in unison and put the car back on the trucks on the rail. And then we had a locomotive pull it all the way around to San Pedro. What's happening here, since these cars were smaller, we were able to put them on a flatbed. And the guy waving his arm there, I hired him because his experience is moving rail cars for the movies. His name is Bob Cradle. And I put him on a contract to move these cars. And OST Trucking also does a lot of rail car rent moving. And it's helpful to have your own port police because they can give you an escort. That's what we're happening here. We're driving around from Wilmington to San Pedro.
How were they secured from rocking sideways?
They had them all strapped down very tightly there, and the question was how were they held down from rocking, and it's because they were strapped down very tightly. Since I hired a guy who knew what he was doing, that's one of the lessons I learned, is no substitute for people who know what they're doing. And I hired Mr. Cradle to do that, confident he would get them over there. He was also the one who got the car 1058 out on the forklifts because I knew he knew what he was doing. We had a number of people following it. The rail fans came down that day to watch the move, so we had a bit of a parade going. And this was a bit of an adventure because we had never tested the handbrake before. Because of course we couldn't do it in the warehouse. So what they're doing is they're unloading the car, and you'll watch the gentleman up in the cab. His name is Dave Garcia, another one of my consultants. He's frantically trying to stop the car from coming down. There he is. See him working the handbrake. You know, they had to stop it because he couldn't stop the car. And once I got things settled again, then they decided to try it. Okay, now let's try it again. Not that anybody like me was nervous at the time that we were going to crash this thing, not at all. That's Dave. Again, if you go down and look at the cars right now, they look almost like that, almost brand new. What I did is I have two-man crews. There's a motorman and there's a conductor, and the conductor is supposed to interact with the passengers. The conductor also keeps an eye on the passengers because I was concerned that there'd be some graffiti or carving in the wood or something inside the cars. There's been nothing in 10 years. People get on those cars and they respect them. And this is the inside of the car. Again, those are the seats that Ron Hayes made. His name is on the bottom of every one of them. The issue came, again, I have the old car cards up there. You see the bare light bulbs. And one of our engineers said, well, why do you have the bare light bulbs? I said, well, that's what they used to have. And he said, well, what happens if somebody brings a surfboard onto the red car? And I go, first of all, nobody's going to bring a surfboard onto the red car. But because, I mean, they're not going to knock the lights out. But we're not really that close to the surf to bring a surfboard on anyway. There's a museum in Iowa that has all these car cards. A lot of the stuff you see here, you saw that gold thing go by. That is actually the controller that the motorman uses. I found those in Chicago, and it was a company that did mining locomotives, and those are actually controllers from old mining locomotives that we bought from them, which are very robust. These are the signboards at the station. Again, we had the challenge of, you see the ADA ramp to get up, and then also the ramp to get to the cars. The challenge is there because 1058 was wider than the 500 cars. We have little platforms on the 500 cars to make the gap narrower. This is the beginning of the opening on July 19th. This car coming through has all the dignitaries on it, and if you look real closely inside the car, you'll see a man run down the aisle because all the dignitaries are waving out the window. And if they kept waving out the window, they would have hit their arms on the railing right here and broken their arms, which really would have put a damper on the whole event. See the hands out the window? And all of a sudden there's a guy moving down saying, get your hand right there, get your hands in. There he is. He's right there is that railing, which would have broken their arms. Councilwoman Hahn. So at that day we had, we counted, hand count, 5,000 people showed up. We don't know how many actually showed up because we lost count, but we had maybe between 5,000 and 10,000 people showed up for opening day. And they were online for at least 2 hours before we only went back and forth, and they were on for 2 hours just waiting to get on the car that day. Again, you see the difference in color between the 1058 and the 501. In fact, if you come down today, you can still get one of those paper conductor caps, too, if you like. Of course, you have to have a ribbon cutting, Betty Carnett and Deborah Bowen. So after all the speechifying, then we decided to start loading people on board, and that's what we're doing here. The first group is going out. These are all the dignitaries going back. We picked them up at one station and brought them to the opening. And those are the guys who actually were the heroes of the whole project. Those are the craftsmen you saw in that video. And that's That's one of the motormen. He's still working there. He's the last one of the originals. So it runs from the cruise terminal. You can get off at the Maritime Museum and go all the way to 22nd Street and go to Crafted. That's the video I wanted to show you guys. I'm open for any questions you'd like to ask, and I have a question for you at the end, so I have to be reminded I have to ask you guys a question. So let's start right over there.
Is there a barn where you keep them when they're not running? I remember seeing a barn, car barn.
A car barn, that's the tent. I'm sorry, the car barn, is there a car barn? The car barn is actually where you saw 1058 in the video. We put a tent up. What is happening is the project, we built the project and we put it in a temporary tent that's only been there for 10 years. And the plan is to actually build a permanent structure. The other thing is if you go down there and at 22nd Street where the tent is, try to mention my name when you're down there and say, Bob Henry, I'd like you to see 1058, because we don't take 1058 out very often. We may take it out once a month, because it was built originally in 1907, and the 500 cars are steel frame. They're very solid. What's happening with 1058 is like some of us were sagging on the ends. So the car is sagging, and it's very delicate to run. But ask them, can we go in the tent, look at 1058? Because it is in the tent. But if you're at 22nd Street, we just built a new marina south of that, Cabrillo Way Marina. There's 2 rows of palm trees that run south on Minor Street, and you'll see, between those 2 palm trees, someday we hope to run the red car right down through those palm trees and build a permanent structure where the tent is.
The handbrake air brakes, were there air brakes on any of the cars when they were in service?
Well, I'm sorry.
You showed some air brake containers. Did they use those when the cars were in service?
Yeah, the air brakes you saw on the cars were those used as original. What we did is, again, we duplicated everything. We found manufacturers who could either duplicate what they had or actually were the original manufacturers, as the California glass bending was, and we were able to reproduce it. We had a situation where you ask a question, I tell the story. 1058, we converted that, as you saw, from the street running to rail. And we also had all the air brake system on it. We tried to keep everything original. There's something called track brakes, which are magnetic brakes which come down and right on the rails and stop the car quickly. We didn't want to put track brakes on because what happens is there are no seat belts in the car and everybody would go this way. So the PUC, if you're a California taxpayer, you're getting your money's worth with the CPUC, let me tell you, because they can really regulate things. What happened is that we had to do a stopping test for all the cars using the air brakes. And it had to be so many feet, it had to stop on so many feet. Well, 1058 weighs 85,000 pounds. And what we had to do was load it with sandbags. So I went out and bought sandbags on my credit card, believe it or not. Went out and bought sandbags, enough sandbags to duplicate a weight of a full car. So what we had to do is start the car running down the track and then stop it within the distance, and we couldn't do it. So that car, since it's running on the original air brakes, is so heavy that we have to run it at a lower speed because we can't stop it within the distance of the PUC. But it is running on the original air brakes, and we didn't want to use the track brakes. Again, we tried to do everything as original as possible. In that case, it kind of cost us a little because we can't run it at full speed. But the other cars, we had the sandbags in those too, and they stop when they should. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if you said it or not, but how much did it cost to build? Where did the money come from?
Well, the Port of LA is how much did it cost to build and where did the money come from? The number I use is $10 million.
One car?
No, the whole system. We spent $1.5 million refurbishing the track, because what happened on that track, that was the old coal trains that used to run all the way down to berth 46. So the track went like that. So we had to smooth it out. In fact, if you ride on the cars now, they still start doing a lot of that because there's stuff going on. So we spent $1.5 million for that. Plus, I had all my carpenters. They're on the clock anyway for the harbor department. The Port of LA is a city department, but it is a revenue-producing department. We're not a tax-supported department. In fact, we send money to the city of LA. We pay for fire. All the fire. If you go to the Port of LA, you see the fire department down there. We pay for that. That's not our fire department. We have our own police department, but we don't have our own fire department. So we actually send money to the city of LA, and they'd like us to send more, actually. But so since we're revenue producing from the shipping, that's why we're able to build a new marina, which you'll see down there. That cost us $125 million for that marina. We're now doing a water cut between the Maritime Museum and the fire station right on the waterfront as part of the waterfront project to bring the water closer to the port or to the street. That's costing us $13 million to do that water cut. If you go to the north end of the line where the cruise terminal is, there's a fountain. We put a fountain in. The same people who did the Bellagio fountain put a fountain in for us. That fountain cost $14 million. So we spend money, but we make a lot of money. You know, we're the #1 port in the country. The container companies, I say the port is kind of like a big shopping mall. The container companies are our JCPenney's and Macy's and everything, and then we have all little boutique stores. But the container companies pay us a lot of money. And what we do is, as a landlord, we build a terminal and we lease it to that terminal operator for 30, 35 years. And they pay us, even if they bring no containers in, they pay us a few $1 million a year. And then for every container they bring in, they pay us even more money. So we're able to do things like crazy things like this because we do make a lot of money. But again, the reason we're doing a lot of this is what has happened over the years is that San Pedro was built as an adjunct to the port, you could say. You had the fishing industry, you had the canning industry, you had shipbuilding, all that is gone. So now what we're trying to do is build a buffer between the port and the community to keep the operations of the port away from the community. That's why if you go down and see the waterfront now, it looks entirely different than it did 10 years ago. This was the first project along the waterfront that we got running. Since then we built the promenade, we built the fountain, we're doing the water cut. Okay, the Red Car Museum, well, I mentioned in the video, or actually in the slideshow, the Beacons building. We have a proposal, we have a design for the museum right now. It's really kind of not on the schedule for construction right now. Maybe 2015, 2016. It'll be an interactive museum. We're trying to find something that'll make people come down and interact with the exhibits rather than just having static exhibits. And but like I said, what I want to do is work with the Orange Empire Railway Museum. As I mentioned earlier, they're in Paris. How many people have been to Paris? How many people know where it is? You know, it's 3 people. And it's a heck of a drive from here. So it's a symbiotic thing where they can bring their materials here to us in the more populated area. And also then people can say, oh, I want to see more of this, and then they'll go to Paris. That's why we're working in conjunction with each other. But it's really not on our timetable yet, but it's there. And knowing Geraldine, our executive director, when she says something's going to be done, something is done. So.
All right. Do you have plans for any more of the joint events with the museum? I'm thinking back when the Santa Fe,
yeah, we did some joint events back in 2005. I brought in locomotive 3751 with the San Bernardino Railroad Historical Society. We brought them back in 2007. I brought them back in again because we were doing our centennial, and they were there. The problem with locomotive 3751, if you had been down there during that time, you noticed the thing was very big. And the problem is, when they came in, actually they backed in around the West Basin, the old PE West Basin line, backed into the siding just south of 6th Street. The problem is the drive wheels on 3751 are so large that when they were going around the curve, it was wearing the flanges off the drive wheels. So those 2 times that you saw 3751 there will probably be the only times it'll ever be there, because it was the group, some of the group would like to bring it back. Others say, the operating guy said, we can't afford to buy new drive wheels, so therefore they can't get around the curve. There's been talk of, there's a couple of locomotives up at the Traveltown Museum in Griffith Park. And one of those, actually both those locomotives are used in the harbor. And we've been kind of talking like saying, well, maybe we'll take one of those locomotives and refurbish it and put it down and run it along the harbor. And of course I'm going, please, not me, I don't want to do that. You know, I've already been through that once. But we've been talking about doing that, but it's talk. But again, Recon Parks, the city of Recon Parks Department doesn't really want to give up their things, and we're not ready to do it. But yeah, we'd like to do more railroad events. In fact, a couple of weeks ago there was supposed to be a railroad revival event in the port. Willie Nelson was supposed to be here. Unfortunately got canceled at the last minute. That was Halloween weekend. But you know, and any time we bring railroad stuff in, we'd like to bring it in because it attracts people. When we had the locomotive here, it was a lot of people when the locomotive was here, but you should have seen all the people who were here when the thing pulled out. It was unbelievable. They chased that locomotive for miles in their cars watching it leave.
Also, some of the elementary schools brought there had been tours of the locomotive.
Right.
Talk about that?
Yeah, the San Bernardino Railroad Historical Society, that's what they did. Wolfgang Fengler is actually one of the prime movers behind the locomotive, and he organizes an educational thing where the kids go through each car, and Wolf will teach them physics. Wolf is actually an engineer and works at one of the aerospace companies, or at least did at the time, and he would give them physics lessons on how locomotives work. And in fact, the Wheatons actually, if you go to their website, the Peninsula Seniors website, there's a very good video that they did with Wolf. And I know Wolf, he was one of the ones I worked with to get the locomotives in. He's a great guy. But I say go to the Peninsula Seniors website, because there's a great video of Betty and Wolfgang talking about the project, how when the locomotive was here and what they do with the kids. It's really a very good program.
I thought in Griffith Park they had the red line cars.
At Griffith Park, they have a car at Griffith Park. It's a metal. It's a blimp car. A blimp car. I don't know if you saw in the movie, but the blimps are very big metal cars used during World War II primarily to bring troops down. And they were actually in Portland, and they were brought down to L.A. during World War II to run shipyard workers to the shipyards, also to bring troops in. And the U.S. Maritime Administration was running those cars. The car is in bad shape. Back in 2000, about 2000, I was approached by the council member, Tom LaBonge, who represents and still does, if we would take the car and refurbish it. And I said, sure, if I could run it for so many years. I'd like to run it for 3 years. It was really not something we could do. It was too big. And well, we went up and looked at it, and it would not work. But there is a car up there. It's out on exterior display, or at least it was at the time we were there, and it's in not very good condition. And what they did is they painted half the car lengthwise as a red car, and half the car in the green for the MTA. And so, but it's a huge car, and it's all metal. What I wanted to do, again, I tell stories, but you see these cars here that I built. I wanted to create a certain era of when you get on the car, wood is a lot friendlier than metal. And that's why I did the wood cars. The metal cars, they just don't have that ambiance I wanted. But we were talking about bringing that car down and working on it. But I had my guys already working on ours, too. So
wood cars are more maintenance.
yeah, the 501, the wood cars are more maintenance, yes. But what we did with the 501s, you see them built on steel frames. What that reduces is the cracking of the paint and all the other things that's the problem with 1058. If you ride 1058, and I don't know when they're going to put it out again, it's kind of fun to ride because the whole car just kind of sways and moves, and because the whole car it's wood. Whereas our steel cars, when you go down the track, it's like being in an automobile. It's very solid. But that preserves the paint, because what we have with the 1058 is the cracking. All that wood shifting, the windows get out of alignment, and that's one reason the PE, one of the many reasons the PE went out was the maintenance. The maintenance of the cars, the maintenance of the right-of-way was very expensive. So to keep all these things running, they had shops all over. In fact, in downtown Torrance, that's where one of the main PE shops was. There was a deal between Jared Sidney Torrance and Henry Huntington to put one of the shops in Torrance, and it wasn't. And if you go to the Torrance Historical Society website, there's pages on the shops that they used to have there. But they had maintenance shops all over the place because these cars are really tough to maintain.
You said the red car stopped running in 1962. Was that all the line?
Yeah, the final line that was actually 1961. The first long line built was from downtown LA to Long Beach. And the last line taken out of service was the line from downtown LA to Long Beach. If you ride the blue line today, you're riding on the old red car line, because that's the only right-of-way that was maintained as a continuous right-of-way, and they were able to run the blue line cars on that. Of course, they put flyovers over the intersections. That's one of the things with the red cars. There's always been a conspiracy theory that the Chevrolet or General Motors and everybody knocked them out of business. But really what had happened is that there were so many grade crossings because the line was a street line that by the time, with all the automobiles coming into Los Angeles, there was so much interruption and so much congestion that the red cars couldn't compete anymore. So people started buying automobiles. As I said, the biggest enemy for Henry Huntington was Henry Ford. The story is that the reason I got stuck with the San Pedro red car project is that there was a gentleman who was pushing that project in the late 1990s to put a red car line in downtown Los Angeles. And what he was doing was going to all the council members trying to drum up support for the red car line in downtown Los Angeles. Well, every time you talk to a councilman, they go, well, that's great, but what's going to happen in my area? So Councilman Rudy Savornich was the councilman here at the time, and he and I are friends, and I worked downtown in City Hall. I was the liaison between the Harbor Department and City Hall. So Rudy and I were talking one day about this, and he said, well, how can we do a red car line project here in the port? And so I got in the middle of it right then and went back and talked to our executive director, who was Larry Keller at the time, and that's how I got stuck with the project. I said, well, it's your idea, Bob, why don't you build it? So, but anyway, what's happening with the downtown Broadway is they're trying to run it down Broadway to revitalize. Broadway actually looks a lot better than it did. They've done a lot of nice work on the, if you've been down the Orpheum Theater, and they've done some nice work. Councilman Huizar wants to run a red car line down the middle of Broadway, and they're trying to raise money for it. I think there was actually something on the ballot in the last election for the property owners to be assessed to build it. It'll be very expensive, and as I found with my project, running something down the middle of the street is going to be a real challenge. If you go out and look at our waterfront red car line, you'll see a fence on both sides. You'll see restricted gates, and that's if they're going to run red cars down the middle of a street, especially on Broadway, with all the traffic and the pedestrians, it's going to be a real challenge. So they've been working on that since 1999, I think, or 1998, 99. So they're getting closer, but they're going to have to raise a lot of money, and it's going to be a real challenge for them to do that. Anaheim is there. I saw something in the paper the other day. Anaheim wants to put in a street car line in. Yeah. So again, they're going to be challenged too, because they're going to be running. They're going to be street running, which is in today's liability environment is a real challenge. Anybody else? One more back there.
Economically, is the trolleys more expensive than automobile type trucks and stuff?
Economically, is the trolley more expensive than trucks, you mean, or buses?
And buses.
Yes, that is the problem. That's one reason trolleys have gone out and buses have come in. That's what happened back in the 50s, is that when the red cars are so difficult to maintain, the trackage is so difficult to maintain, and the PE was actually a private enterprise. It wasn't a municipally operated railroad. And what was happening is that if you ran down a street, for example, like in front of Walker's Cafe, you saw those tracks there, or you ran down through Redondo. If it ran down those streets, the Pacific Electric was responsible for the maintenance of the street. Even though the tracks were in it, they had to maintain the street. So it becomes very expensive to lay rail and then to maintain the rail and also maintain all the infrastructure that goes with it. So, but buses you can move anywhere, and that's what happened, is that they took all the red cars out and replaced them with buses. The MTA came, National Bus Lines came in and replaced them with buses. The advantage of buses, of course, if things change, you can always change the route of the bus. Once you lay the rail, you know, whatever happens, if the population moves away or the store is closed, you've got rail going nowhere to where it should be going. So it's very expensive, and that's why you hear about these projects, and sometimes they come into fruition, sometimes they don't, because the reality sets into the cost. The initial cost, like, you know, is $600 million. We built ours cheaply because we already had the existing rail line. That was the old coal train line. So I was able to take that trackage and say, okay, we're going to rebuild the trackage, which is fairly inexpensive, only $1.5 million, but the rail's already there. Once you start laying rail, then that's when the cost really goes up. And we were able to put the overhead wires in for, I had a good deal on that, where we run the wires, because that company was actually doing another job in the port, and we were able to get the wires done. So I was able to piggyback on some things too, but when you're starting from scratch, running rail on the street, very expensive, and that's why they want to stick with buses. You know, talking about combining with other events, and what I've done in the past is I had a Model T club come down. There is a Model T club. I haven't talked to them in at least 6 years, but I had them come down one day, just to kind of do, and they showed up in some of them wore the costumes and everything. And that's what I tried to do, is we're trying to recreate a certain era, and then try to have things that go along with it. So I did have the Model T Club come down. We do have a classic car show at the port in July, as a matter of fact. It's not related to, we run the red cars, which is kind of fun, because it's kind of fun to watch the red car pull into the station and it's full of people, because they park somewhere else and come up, and then all the classic cars are there. So what we do is, since I'm basically, well, what I wanted to do is I wanted to charge something to ride the cars. So when you get on, you're going to pay $1, and you'll get a ticket. There's actually a little souvenir ticket. I do that for a number of reasons. One, because I don't want people, certain elements of the neighborhood, getting on and riding back and forth all day. But I do that. But some days, like these events, like if you go on our website, you see these special events like July 4th, we do something, the Happy Harbor Halloween we had at Halloween time. The car runs for free that day. And it's kind of fun because then the cars are really full of people. But that's how we do it. We use them. And Lobster Festival is a big event for us in September. And what we do there is the car is at 22nd Street. There are parking lots right there. We are running shuttle buses to the Lobster Festival from the other parking lots. What will happen is we run from 22nd Street to Port Sakal, which is the next station up the line. There are 4 stations, 22nd Street, Port Sakal, 6th Street, and the cruise terminal. So what we'll do is, as part of the event, we run for free, of course, and we only run back and forth between the 2 stations. We'll have a line of people off the station platform into the parking lot. They'd rather wait and ride the red car for that distance than take the shuttle bus around. And that's when I see that, that's when I get excited, because I can see that finally, or not finally, but this thing really has some cachet to it. It has something that people want to see. And when they do come down for the Lobster Festival, that's one of the parts of the event, is to ride the red car. So it is kind of fun to watch that stuff go on. But those are the special event days we do run for free. You know.
Battleship Iowa have an impact on what you're doing?
The Battleship Iowa has had an impact on what we're doing, and that's been one of our challenges right now, is because when we built the line, we started at 22nd, 6th, 22nd Port Sakal, 6th, and the cruise terminal. The closest entry to the Iowa is at 1st Street. And we've been debating, should we put another station there, which means we have to go through a whole bunch of regulatory things. We're finding with the Iowa that people are driving in, doing the same thing. They're driving in and driving out. So we haven't really seen the impact on the red car. The people come down to ride it because, you know, they remember, a certain age group remembers riding the red car, so they also served on the Iowa or another battleship. So we get a lot of those people during the day. But it really hasn't had the impact we really would like to see it have. Again, we have to find some way to link these things together. We haven't quite gotten over that challenge. Integrate all the activities together. We keep all our activities on the website. So, for example, the veterans activity that was at the Iowa was on our website. It's www.portofla.org, and go to that site and check it from time to time. And you know, and we have activities all the time down at the port. We're trying to do as many things as we can along the waterfront now as we can. And come on down.
Thank you for watching Peninsula Senior Lecture Series. I'm Betty Wheaton. See you next time.